Welcome to Tell Me More, Coffee with Chris Yip, the official podcast of the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering at the University of Toronto. Each month, I sit down with someone from our vibrant global community to talk about what places them at the heart of designing bold solutions for a better world. You'll meet alumni, students, and professors who are making a difference across a range of fields, including some where you may not expect to find them. My guest today is Luigi La Corte. A graduate of our civil engineering program, Luigi's career has ranged from construction to high finance. However, in 2022, he left all of that to become the co-founder and CEO of Provision, a company that is leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to help contractors get things built. Luigi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Looking forward to this because I want to do renovations in my house. I'm kind of thinking, you use Provision for that, but it's such a challenging area. Right?
Yeah, it's such an interesting industry and it has so many problems. And, someone now who has capital and, has a lot of energy, I'm really excited to make a splash.
Make a splash. Yeah.
That's
And
right.
I think, we're going to talk about how you got into this space, how that emerged out of an undergrad in Civ. Let's go back to the beginning part, right? So how did you end up in Civ?
It was basically my dad. My dad's a contractor. He's a commercial contractor. If you want to do your house, that'd be someone that you would contact.
We'll swap cards
plug
later.
you.
Yeah. There you go.
And like any immigrant business owner, he used his son to provide some value to him, and so I would work on job sites for him for free, and he would bring me to all these construction projects.
I like the for free part. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he gave me room and board. That's very generous of him. So he would bring me on site, and I really just loved being there. I loved sweeping. I loved the smell of construction. I loved seeing him build things. That was really, really fun. But he hated spending money on structural engineers when they needed to stamp drawings because he wanted to take out a wall and it was load bearing. It annoyed him. Luigi, you should be a civil engineer. That way I don't have to pay for structural engineering anymore. It just so happened
that's a family discount.
That's a family discount, yeah.
Okay.
But I really did enjoy engineering. I love the built world. So I was naturally attracted to Civ. There's an allure of a building and seeing it on the skyline. I think there's a lot of power kind of encoded in that.
You're building something that's not going to not get taken down in 5 years. It's going to be there for 100 years or 2 years.
If you do it well.
If you do it well, it's
That's
going
right.
to be up there for hundreds, thousands of years. It will be there, right?
Yeah.
In a design that works, right?
I wasn't really thinking of that when I wanted to go into Civ, but I did love the idea of making, let's say, a mark on a skyline, or hey, that's my building. I designed it and I've impacted it.
There's a legacy built.
Yeah, there's a legacy. There's a bit of ego in there, for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
But I will say, so once I got a taste of civil engineering, I worked for Arup, their multidisciplinary engineering firm. Yeah. They have an office in Toronto. That's where I did PEY.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love it.
You didn't love it?
I didn't love it.
Oh.
No, I didn't love it, which is really what informed me now landing at Provision.
Right. So what was it about the experience? So Arup, I think, as I read back, you did the design for some of the subway lines, the subway station, right?
So there was a few things I did. So I was there in the infrastructure group, and that's when public-private partnerships were really big. The P3 that we were working on was Eglinton Crosstown. We were bidding on that. We were on a consortium with Bechtel. They lost, obviously, to Ellis Don. Maybe they're happy about that. They probably.
Hey,
are.
I just rode the Crosstown a couple times, and
how was it?
I loved it.
Great.
Seamless.
It finally feels like we're in an interconnected
it was
system.
Yeah, for me that was an awesome experience. And the stations, yeah. Anyway, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I haven't rode it yet, but once we get Ontario Line, I'll be happy with the state of our transit system. When I went to private equity, the last deal I touched was Ontario Line. So I feel like those are bookends of my career before Provision. When I first started at Arup, I was working on Eglinton, and the last deal I touched at Provision, at Plenary was Ontario Line. But anyway, so I found civil engineering when I was working at Arup. What I loved about it was you can influence a building by making smart engineering decisions, and I thought, at least looking at the structural group, the geotechnical group, and the infrastructure group, that you actually don't have that much impact, at least not as much as I thought. Who really has the power? The contractor and the architect.
Right.
But it depends. If you're working on, let's say, a marquee project in Dubai and you're trying to figure out how to make the project viable, you can remove steel from it and make it really good. But you're doing that discipline for 20 years, and I didn't love structural that much. I actually loved the financial aspects of construction. So I ended up working in private equity. I left engineering. I graduated obviously at 1T4 plus PEY, and then I went to go work for a private equity firm that invested capital in these projects like Ontario Line. They're an equity sponsor of that project. And I did that for 6 years. What I found very interesting working for them, very similar problems to my dad's company. My dad, like I said, general contractor. As you do general contracting, sometimes something will happen. You know, a sock clogs, a sump pump in the basement's flooded, someone didn't get insurance and something happened. You know, all these disputes came up. I mean, my dad's a fairly small contractor. When I was working at Plenary, I would see the biggest contractors have very similar problems. So people that we worked with at Plenary or PCL, Elliston, Bird Construction, those are all, you know, top 5 contractors in Canada. And I'd be like, how are you guys having similar problems to my dad's company?
Right.
This doesn't make any sense. You think with all your resources that wouldn't be a problem, but alas, they do. And really the problem ended up being the documents that they were operating from were unstructured PDFs, no way to programmatically understand what was in them, so you'd rely on human labor. And that's how I ended up making the jump to provision. I thought these are problems that can be solved. The technology is going in the direction of taking documents like PDFs, using AI to analyze what's in them, and, you know, presenting that information to a contractor so they can say, hey, this is not a risk I want to take on. And that's how we get to provision.
So having an AI sort of read through it and say, okay, this is really going to be challenging to do versus your interpretation of what when you first read the document or first read a bid or something that goes out for tender.
Yeah, contractors basically, sometimes they will bid on projects almost sight unseen. They don't really know what's in there because they can't. There's 1,000+ pages, plus reports, plus all these things. They only have a couple of weeks to put in a number. Depends on the project, obviously. These big projects, they have a lot more time than that. But it had happened at Plenary where we had hired contractors ourselves, and they would deliver a project, and they'd be like, okay, can I have my money? We'd say, well, actually, there's a provision that says we hold 5% back until the commissioning's done. I'm like, well, I wasn't aware. I'm like, well, you didn't read the documents? It's because they don't have the resources to do it. So I thought, well, if you're going to make these mistakes, let me and my AI read these documents for you and flag, hey, this is a problem. You should be aware before you sign this. And that's the product that we sell, at least one of the products that we sell now.
Obviously, the university, we do lots of contracts. We've been in projects where you're sort of trying to do scoping. And I've always wondered how contractors and people sort of look at these and try to understand how they cost them. And then why do costs not match? And it's just sort of that, I ripped the wall down. Oh, wait, I didn't realize there was asbestos back here or things like that, right?
The problem with construction documents is that there are some components that are text, and text is largely solved. But then the plans, that's not text.
Right, it's drawings.
Those are images, and those images have line weights, and there's different thicknesses, and they need to be interpreted by a human. And by the way, the architects that you hire are making mistakes. So you have human error plus human readable images, which are not good right now within, let's say, LLMs, or not readable by LLMs. And then you have this problem. Well, humans still need to interpret it. So you get various interpretation and various prices. That's a problem now that we're actively solving.
And then you also, I guess you're also worried contractors or people bidding are sort of trying to figure out, like, what do I price this at in order to either get it?
Right. There's a saying in construction that the best price is the second lowest. The second lowest because the one who's lowest probably made some mistakes and is going to be losing money.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot of kind of idiosyncrasies about the construction industry and why it is the way it is. But I mean, the reality is it's a huge part of global GDP, right? $12 trillion, $13 trillion of global GDP, and productivity keeps going down. I mean, like if you compare it to every other industry, it's the only one that, you know, per dollar of value added, the amount of time required is increasing.
Time, yeah. So I guess maybe let's step back a little bit. So you were kind of in the partnership space. You moved from sort of the civil engineering into finance, into private equity, and then you sort of stepped out to become the entrepreneurial side. Like, that's a big jump. What was that like?
It was fairly scary because you don't know what it takes to build a business. Like, I had a general idea and I've had side projects, but you don't really know what it's like to build something that is, you know, $100 million, $500 million in value. And I had always worked for somebody else. They give you the instructions, they give you the goals, but you have to both set a direction and create a plan for doing that. It's a lot.
Right.
So I was hemming and hawing, I think, for about a year. Should I actually start a company? I don't know how to start a company, and I don't know if I'm going to be successful. But I ultimately took the plunge. I thought it was actually fairly low risk. At the time, 28, I felt like I was fairly skilled and could land in a bunch of places. And so I thought risk was much smaller than it felt like. It still felt scary. But now in retrospect, I wish I did it earlier.
Interesting. What I was going to say is you became an entrepreneur kind of in the space you already had experience in, from kind of I know this industry well, I know the players. Do you feel that was super helpful?
I think that's what helped me rationalize doing it, but I actually think it hurt me.
Okay. Sorry.
No, the only reason I think it hurt me is because I already had an established network, and these people were my friends.
Yeah.
And one of the worst things you can do when you're starting a business is going to your friends and saying, "What do you think?" It's like the opposite of what you should be doing.
Luigi, awesome idea.
I love that idea. Yeah. That's great. I want to buy that contract and analyzer. And like, they don't review contracts. It's like, that could be cool. I'm like, well, he loves the idea. He said it could be cool.
Yeah.
But it did help me rationalize starting the business. Right. So like, it did have value.
So the advice now is to just find your detractors and talk to them, and they become your trusted advisors.
You want people who don't know you who want to buy your product, not people who know you and think your product is kind of cool. I do think, though, I mean, generally what I would love to see is younger people deciding to start businesses a lot earlier, because I don't think it ever gets easier. Like, one of the key impetus for me was I wanted to do it before I had kids.
Okay.
Because I knew it was going to be really hard to rationalize starting a business where the expected return is less than my salary, knowing that I have to take care of a family.
Sure.
But at the time, I don't have kids. I'm with my now wife. I'm very happy. Let's try it. And I thought that worked. But when you're really young, you almost have nothing to lose, and you don't know how risky it is.
Right.
So you might as well try, and you'll probably learn a lot more than working for someone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, because I've had lots of coffee conversations with students now. I mean, I think when you graduated, probably the entrepreneurship was probably not as big as it is now, especially at the undergrad level. And we're seeing undergrads, they get these ideas, they roll them forward, they build through this whole process. They do all that kind of negotiating. And I think back to when I was undergrad, and I was like, that was like the furthest thing from I was like, let's just get a job and someone tells me what to do situation, right?
Yes. Things have completely changed.
Yeah.
Technology has reduced the barriers to building a business. You need now the will more than anything. You don't actually need an idea. You don't need a team. You don't need funding. You need the will. If you have the will, you will absolutely do it. Back when I decided to build a business, the first thing I did, I did brainstorm the problem space. Like, I remember the day that I quit, I sat down with a giant legal pad of paper, and I just, here are all the problems, drew a framework of like a wireframe. Oh, this could be really cool. And I'll plug all these things in.
And I'm going to talk to my friends, and they're going to love my idea.
That's right. Yeah. I just told my mom. My mom's like, great, I love it. I'm like, fantastic. But then after that, I'm like, okay, well, now I need a team. And the team I needed, because I didn't have a data science background. I knew there was data science components, and I didn't know how to build software. I don't know if you need that anymore. I don't. There are so many tools where I can have an idea and I can build an application very quickly. And now you actually need the will. You need to say, I actually want to do this. I want to start a company. And you need distribution, a way to reach your customers, which is, I need to know how to sell.
Right.
So if anyone would want to start a business, you really don't need much. You don't need a team. You need a way to sell your product, and you need, the will to make it work. But back again, I needed capital. So we raised capital. We raised collectively over 13 million CAD, and we needed distribution. So we had to learn how to sell, and we needed to, spin up socials and LinkedIn. But now you just don't need much of those things.
So one of the questions I was about to ask is like, so a lot of stuff starts in Toronto. You obviously came out of U of T, but did you try to start here with the raises, or did you went to the Valley type of?
We did classic Valley fundraising. We're a Canadian company. We're a CCPC, Canadian Controlled Private Corporation. My intent is to stay Canadian as long as possible.
Great.
But there are forces outside of my control that are pulling us to the U.S., and there is a world where we may have to reincorporate into the U.S., and it's really all about capital.
Right.
So there's a lot more capital in the U.S., and they have a lower bar to give you that money relative to their Canadian peers. So, for example, if I have $1 million in ARR, I can go raise from a Canadian investor, and maybe they'll give me 10 times revenue for my valuation. So I'm going to sell 20% of my business. I'm going to raise $2 million. They're going to value me at $10 million. So I'm going to dilute myself by 20% to raise $2 million. I go to the same American company, and they're going to give me a $30 million USD valuation. So it's really hard to compete because they have a lower bar to give you capital, and there's a lot more capital. So there's more competition, which means you can drive your prices up. Anyway, when we went to go raise capital, we actually first went to an accelerator, Y Combinator.
Right.
We did the summer 22 batch. Y Combinator felt like the best approach because I knew so little about starting software. I'd never had a software role ever. I didn't know how to build software. I didn't know how to think about software. I didn't know how to raise funding. And they solve that all for you in a 3-month intensive that culminates in investors pining to give you money. And we did that, and it worked out very well.
So how did you identify the team that you wanted to build?
So the first thing I did was I nailed the story because I knew that anyone I was going to pitch was going to ask, what are we doing? So I had to have a compelling story, and I had to give them a problem that they thought was tractable. 2, I had to somewhat imagine what the output would be. In my view, I knew it was going to be software that they were going to sell to businesses. So there's an enterprise component. It can't be a kind of strung together app. It has to be professional grade. So somebody who's shipped professional software. I also knew that the capabilities that I was asking for in my software weren't really possible. This is before GPT-3. So I was thinking we have to train our own models.
Right.
And so you can get Google searches to figure out what I need to be able to build this. Now I would go plug it into Claude or to ChatGPT. I'm trying to think about this. What do I need to, build an MVP? So figure that out. Then I went to the market. And what I did there was 2 things. 1, went to my smartest friends and said, I want you to tell me 3 of your smartest friends that either do data science or full stack software application development. And then I would go to them. Are you interested in joining me as a co-founder? No? Okay. Can you give me 3 of your friends? And so I basically did that and ran that tree until I landed on my data science person, who was also a U of T alumnus. And my other co-founder I met online.
Okay.
So I was looking for a full stack software engineer. And again, had the story, had my data science person, and I gave him the pitch. And he decided to join. He actually moved his whole life from South Africa to here, basically on a pitch. Rehomed his dog, ended up breaking up with his girlfriend.
Okay.
Brendan, great guy. And we've been building together since.
So, so how big is Provision now?
We're 15 people. We just raised some financing, which valued us at around $50 million enterprise value. But those aren't real representations of value because you have, very low liquidity. But that's, how I would quantify size at Provision. We service customers in the UAE, in Europe, in America, and in Canada. And, we have big aspirations to grow, which is why we just raised capital.
Right.
So, but 15 people, and that's our enterprise value.
And that's a combination of developers, full stack developers?
Mostly full stack developers,
Okay.
Data science, and then we have a small sales team. And myself, which I run product, and then we have customer success and subject matter experts, people who've worked in construction.
And do you have people in these different countries as well, or is it's all repped out of Toronto?
It's all repped out of Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah. We only have one customer success person to handle all these companies.
And the scale of the projects that you are, it's sort of B2B versus B2C. So it's not like you're not working with, I need a new DAC type thing.
It's only commercial construction. It usually skews to large projects. I've talked to some of our customers who have run projects, but Elliston is a big customer. They're our biggest customer, and they run almost every project in Canada on Provision. So if you see an Elliston project, they probably have a corresponding project on Provision. Same with PCL. PCL does a small subset of their projects, but big projects that they're pursuing. So they typically skew towards hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in value.
Wow. And what did they do before? Was it reliant on a lot of eyeballs looking at stuff and hoping that they didn't miss something in a line weight in the drawing? When did they see this value chain kind of appear?
Right. Most companies don't have a lot of eyeballs to read their documents. So the current state, a company that I would pitch, I would say, tell me about the last time you made a mistake where you didn't catch something in your document. Oh, it happened last week. We missed this thing. Well, I said, great. Wouldn't it be fantastic if I could put that on autopilot and flag any issue before you sign? And they would typically say yes, in which case we would enter into an agreement and we would provide value, in which case they'd upload the documents Provision. Provision would show on a flag basis, here's a high impact item, a high impact item, a medium impact item, and here's what you do about it. So for big companies, they have many, many people doing this, and yet they still want to either make them more efficient or reduce the error rates. We also do work with people who are doing that, a lot, like insurance companies who are reviewing construction documents. They do that every day, all day. Now they do use Provision. So that's one component of value. A big company like Elliston PCL, they're also collaborating, reviewing these documents together, making sure changes don't introduce new risks, and we help them there as well. So we're either flagging risks or helping them collaborate and reviewing these documents. And those are 2 products we offer now. we have many more products where we're actually going to do the estimating work ourselves. My view is, let's say I'm a contractor who's responding to that project you want to do. You give me the documents, I click a button, and I say, here you go. Here's how I would do this project. Here's the pricing. Here's the approach. Here's how long it would take me. That's where I think things are going. So that's how we got started. But going back to U of T and my undergraduate, what I found to be very valuable, there was a course, it was a communications course. I forget which one it was. But I did Toastmasters and I did, I think it was
UTESCA or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. They make you give speeches.
Yeah.
But that was one of the best courses that I could possibly do. I think the bar for communication engineering is pretty low. And I was like a top 10% student, but I knew I wasn't going to be top 1%. But what I thought I would do is like really invest in my communication. And I'd say that's helped me. That's helped me so much, because being able to articulate an idea and being able to sell someone, not when they don't need it, but being able to convince them with logic and fact has been incredible.
You actually raised an interesting point earlier a little bit when you sort of said that this is where our product's going. You said doing the estimates, but then I think you also said how it would actually be orchestrated. Is that in terms of like whether the nature of the design, like integrated build approaches and all the different strategies people have for large scale projects now?
I do think that's the best possible outcome for software, where an owner, let's say U of T, says, here's what we want to build. I do think software is good at the deterministic stuff, to say, okay, great, this is what's in scope. So we see this is the building, this is the envelope that they want. That's all deterministic. We can pull that out. And I think it should take a click of a button for us to prepare that information for a contractor so then they can get the best price. Some of the things around value engineering, like have you considered in this building adding this or removing this? I think that's better for humans to decide. And I think it's because it's so complex of a system. LLMs will get there, but right now contractors are best at using what they've seen in the past to influence the cost and the design of a project. That data is not really captured in LLMs. It's in humans' brains.
Yeah.
And LLMs are getting really good at reasoning, but there's still problems with agentic memory, and there's still problems with reasoning over these very visual symbols. And so there's a lot of things that need to be solved before agents can do that. But what I envision provision to be is you receive a project and you click a button and then everything is prepared for you. Here's the scope. Here's what you need to do. Here are the sub packages you need to send out. Here are the questions to send the owner. I reviewed your contract. Here are the red lines, everything ready to go. So the cost for a contractor to now do your job is dropping to zero. More competition for you. Now, instead of Bird and Eastern, now there's 10 contractors who want to do this job because the cost to bid this job is going down. It should result in some savings for business owners because there's more competition.
So, what do you see the future? Or you talked a little bit about those sort of features inside provision. You have 15 people right now. Like, what do you see? Do you see that as the nature of the work? Do you see the companies scaling?
We have a lot to do now. What we're seeing as tools become, as they proliferate and the cost of building software drops, we're able to build more without increasing headcount. Software is so capable now. I can speak into a microphone and get an addition to my app on the other end. And that's crazy.
Right.
So that's just going to continue. That trend will continue. The models will get better. So we can keep building and influencing without scaling headcount. My plan is to keep adding features and building value for our customers. But what I really want to see happen is contractors becoming more profitable. I think it should be better for general contractors to run their businesses. So instead of 2% margins, 5 or 10% margins, as long as they're doing the right thing. And I think that will be the case if they're putting the busy work aside and now they're focusing on the value add work. And that just makes sense, right? Imagine every car manufacturer was trying to figure out how to interpret plans. No, they're also leaning into their strengths. Ferrari's doing speed and horsepower, and Ford is doing mass market and all that stuff.
Boring
right?
design, yeah.
No, it's all important stuff. And I think I would love for general contracting and construction to be a very high margin business. And I want to see more of them ultimately. And I think I can do that by getting rid of some of the risky, boring stuff.
Right.
And ultimately, if we look at the reality, we need more subcontractors. We need more electricians. We need more plumbers. Those things, like, you can't augment with AI.
Right.
But if I make it a lot more attractive to start and scale a business because you can use my software, that's a win for everyone.
So what are some of the competitors to Provision right now?
So there's a few. We look at an Atlanta-based contractor, Document Crunch. They're further ahead than us in Series B. I look at the current state, which are people just not reading their documents. That's a competitor. That's probably our largest competitor. And then, at least in contract review, we're competing with ChatGPT and Anthropic, Claude and ChatGPT, which is a big problem. As soon as you have to compete with them, you've basically lost because they are very capable and they're basically everywhere. And sometimes their product is free.
Yeah, but I mean, in your space, there's certain things for which this human design element becomes something like you said, you can't bring it into the software. That still needs the person to live. So you still have a place for that, right?
Yeah, well, because we were facing pressures from, let's say, ChatGPT and Claude, we would go to a customer and say, hey, do you want to spend $20,000 on our software? They'd be like, sure, it's 100% accurate, but I'll go with the 60% accurate product for free, which is ChatGPT. It ends up becoming a hard conversation because you're trying to convince people who haven't typically reviewed their documents to now review their documents. And they went from 0% review to 60% review. That's huge. That's a win. Maybe it's not worth going 60 to 100 for that price. So we decided to take a bit of a turn and go into some of the hardest problems, which aren't interpreting text, but it's taking these drawings and, when you're reviewing these drawings and you're bidding them, it's basically generating revenue. So can we make that easier for contractors so I can bid more projects and make fewer mistakes? And that's the path we took, which is why we raised that capital.
I mean, this is an interesting conversation because you're in a space where you've developed a product, contractors will use it. I mean, this is the classic thing about AI replacing people, right? How do you position this for the undergrad going into Civ, or going into engineering? Because there are areas where this sort of software is going to start to replace, we're not drafting anymore. We're not drawing stuff. What sort of lessons from U of T engineering are still in play with you now and that we want to reinforce at our students?
If I can modify that question, I'll say what's in play and I'd say what's missing. So what's in play, no matter what you do in your career, you still have to solve problems. And I think engineering gives you the perfect background for problem solving. Identify the desirable KPI or the objective, figure out where you are, and then make a plan of attack. That's really helpful from engineering. Engineering gave me a problem-solving background where you identify the relevant formula, you identify the context, and you try and figure those things out. And I think that's still very relevant. Where I think things have changed, it's no longer just about solving the problem, it's about communicating value. So you need to learn marketing and sales, no matter what. Even if you're working for someone, you'll find that people who aren't as capable will still be promoted ahead of you because they're probably better at marketing and sales. Right. They can market themselves better. They're better. They have, more face time with your boss. I think you still need to learn those things. And then 3, you have to be AI fluent. You have to. And this isn't me selling AI software to them. I think the way things are going, I can produce now more as an individual contributor who's running a company than I would imagine other CEOs can because I'm AI fluent. I have a team of agents doing work for me. And I think as an undergrad, if you can go into the job market and say, hey, sure, I'm an undergrad. And people are hiring fewer undergrads now because of how capable they see these models are. But not only am I an undergrad, but I know how to command an army of 10 agents. You are now very attractive because the reality is most people just don't know how to do that. So if you can market your skills and you can use agents, I think you're very attractive to employers. But ultimately, I'd say, might as well just go start a business. It's not that risky, but you still need to know how to do those two things. You still need to know how to command agents, and you need to know how to market and sell yourself.
Cool. Interesting perspective. I think it's interesting to think about what it means for the kind of curriculum and opportunities we present to students. A lot, I think, is going to come from our co-curriculars and our extracurricular opportunities. Things like the hatchery and entrepreneurship at U of T. Definitely interesting in terms of the opportunities going forward. Such a fast-moving space.
Every day something's changing that can change a business. Yeah, things are
good or bad too.
Good or bad. Yeah, good or bad. Yeah, it's a very exciting time. And if I were an undergrad right now, I'd probably be doing those two things. Is how do I sell things and how do I use agents?
Full props. Congrats on all the success with Provision and wishing you all the best going forward.
I appreciate it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very fun conversation.
All right, thank you. Thanks again for listening to Tell Me More, Coffee with Chris Yip. If you want to catch up on past episodes and to make sure you don't miss the next one, please subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Just look for Coffee with Chris Yip. You can also check out at U of T Engineering on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn for more stories about how our community is building a better world. And finally, if you'd be inspired to join us, we'd love to welcome you. If you're thinking of taking a degree or working with us on our research projects, you can find us online at engineering.utoronto.ca, or you can visit our beautiful campus in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I hope I can join you for coffee soon.